Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and today we're going to be talking about one of my old-time favorite subjects, the Sabian Symbols. I got a great guest coming on in a few seconds, and we'll be talking about that subject very soon. It's a fascinating story, not only historically, but also with its relevance to modern-day astrology as well. So we're going to delve into that when I get through my announcements here. I do want to remind you about my newsletter. My newsletter goes out every Sunday afternoon. And in there you'll find about 2 paragraphs or so, give or take, of what's happening in the world that's what I call mundane astrology. In other words, where the planets are, what's impacting all of us on the Earth together. We're going to see some definite trends there, as you do every week. And then I break it out into the individual signs. We all have our own individual sign. And in those signs, you'll read your sun sign. And I also encourage you to read your rising sign. You put those 2 pieces together, and you're going to be pretty much close to the pocket of what the narrative will look like in your week to come. So I encourage you to do that. You can get there from my website, turningofthewheel.com, or chrisflisher.com. And this also gets posted up on Facebook as well. You can always sign up there as well. So without any further ado, let's get my guest on. His name is Blain Bovee. I've been following him for quite some time. I get his newsletter each day. He is a Sabian astrologer, meaning that he uses the Sabian symbols as his lens to which he looks at the world and what's going on. And we're going to be discussing the Sabian symbols. It's a fascinating subject that I've been intrigued with probably for the last 15, 20 years. So I never get tired of talking about astrology, as you all know. And the Sabian symbols have a special place in my heart because I love the aura that goes with them and the symbology and all that. So it's going to be exciting. So Blain, welcome to the show today. It's great to have you on.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's a great thing. So, the thing about the Sabian symbols. Now, let's do some background for the people who I've done shows in the Sabian symbols before, but why don't you do some background work, set the stage for us so people understand what are the Sabian symbols. We're not talking about, a drum set here. We're talking about SYMBOLS symbols, and just give us a backdrop, your sort of elevator speech and what you see as the Sabian symbols.
Sabian symbols are a set of 360 word images that correspond to each degree of the zodiac. And they were conceived in an attempt to make something symbolic work on a degree to degree basis. And Mark Evan Jones is the author of them. He noticed that there were other astrologers who had attempted and had done some symbols for degrees, but hadn't completed it. He also noted that they were very heavy-handed. They were kind of dark images and moralistic, and they just didn't have a nice vibe about them. So he had a particular personal contact through his own extraordinary experiences. He's a very religious man. He's Christian, but he's Christian in that sense that is open to the mystery and exploring the mystical side of things. And he had a experience or experiences that put him into contact with a disembodied brotherhood or group of ancestors, if you like. And he realized something important could possibly happen here. So then he set about to find the right medium to work with, and he decided to work with L.C. Wheeler, who is a very wonderful, not educated, not worldly, but beautiful and very, very psychic and a highly skilled medium. So they sat together and created in a single day the word images that go to each of the degrees of the zodiac. So what happened was he was a little bit disappointed because some of the symbols didn't seem to work well for him. He thought they were kind of what he called reverse symbols. And so he actually locked them away. And it was a number of years later before his students start to, badger him and say, "Come on, let's work on these things."
Yeah.
And so they did that. And through the 30s, there was a tremendous amount of creative work on the Sabian symbols. They were expanded into a version called the mimeograph version, which are extended word images for each symbol. And then he decided that was taking them in the wrong direction. Somehow something was missing in terms of the requisite genius to really capture what these were all about. Other astrologers, notably Dane Rudyard, picked them up, did his version, and I stress the word version, because he changed many of the Sabian symbols and how they read. In Mark Evan Jones' classic work of 1953, he decided to go back to the original wording, and that book is like a landmark in Western thought and Western astrology. It just has taken hold, I think. The Sabian symbols have taken hold somehow, much to the surprise of many astrologers. I remember Stephen Forrest saying he thought it was just a fad, but look what's going on with all the research and all the new brilliant work that's being done on them. And I think they're here. I think, in fact, the Sabian symbols are the future of astrology in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, they do seem to have an awful lot of a mystical and incredibly powerful imagery that's associated with them. And one thing that I remember about the story of L.C. Wheeler and Edmund Jones is that when they were drawing these cards, so what they did, he drew up a 360 cards, one for each 30 for each sign and one for each degree within those signs, and then he shuffled the deck so they were all random when L.C. Wheeler pulled them up, and then she just thought of an image and he constructed it from that point forward, as I understand it. And is that perhaps the same way you did too?
Absolutely. He did divide the deck at the beginning into either two groups, I forget what, maybe it was 4 groups, but he would shuffle them before each drawing. Yes. Yeah. So it was a double blind and a random shuffle with every new symbol. Yeah.
And so just by sheer virtue of sort of the realm and the vernacular with which we're dealing with, this is a really phenomenal undertaking, because when we think about it, it brings in mathematics, it brings in astrology, it brings in the psychic abilities, it brings in all of these things, all within a symbolic method. Now, astrology is largely a symbolic medium, a symbolic tool, because we have these archetypes which are represented by the planets. Then we see them represented, sort of the outer is reflected by the micro is reflected by the macro, and the macro is reflected by the micro. And there's that symbiotic relationship between the two. And for these degrees for these symbols to be in that area, they really are quite profound. And I'm curious how you use them. Do you use them as a daily oracle? I get your newsletter every day, but which is I guess answers that question to some extent. But on a personal level, how do they impact the individual, and what sort of areas would you encourage a person to look at? Would you encourage them to look at the degrees of their own chart on those days when that number comes by, or how would you encourage someone to sort of interpret them?
Well, the way that I'm going about it in terms of my daily newsletter is that that is accessible, I think, to anybody, whether there is a transit that's touching and making contact with your own horoscope or not. So in a general sense, it's available in that way of being an oracle. And it is especially important when, say, for instance, there are strong aspects touching your horoscope, your sun or your moon, or some important point. Mm-hmm. So it even becomes more interesting. That's when I usually hear from my readers is that, oh my goodness, was that ever right? Mm-hmm. So it does play it up. Yes, I use it every day. It's because I'm writing on them every day, and I have written the Sabian Sage Daily for, this is my 9th year, starting just about now. So I've been around the block a few times with them, and I really enjoy it. There's always something new. There's always something new to discover.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at when you pick the symbol for the day, you're picking it based on where the sun is that day, correct? That's the degree you're looking at?
Well, this is what's different about what I'm doing for the Sabian Sage daily. Normally, when you're doing a daily horoscope, you are using the time and place. And with the Sabian symbols, I really just can't do that. It's not a day by day, it's a degree by degree. So in my year, there's 360 days, if you follow me.
Of course, yeah.
And in the summer, it slows down because the days are over 25 hours long. And, so eventually you get this, I have to skip a day here and there just to make it come back into a line.
Yeah.
The conception of writing this is to when the sun enters a new degree. So it is the sun illuminating a Sabian symbol, and then beyond that, it's where everything else is, the moon especially, and any other planetary configuration that looks like it's really telling a story with and through the sun.
Right. So you are taking into account where the planets are by degree. You're also looking at critical points with regard to the relationship between the sun and other planets. In other words, trines and squares and stuff like that. You're looking at those as well to see if they have meaning for the day.
Absolutely. And it's not tied to any location. So I'm not creating the Sabian symbol daily based on New York City or Washington, D.C. or anything like that.
Right.
In order to make it universal and allow people to enjoy it wherever they are in the world, I just simply begin it when the sun enters the new degree. So that's what's different about this.
Right, exactly. And so when you're talking about entering the new degree, are you rounding up from the seconds up to the next degree as we do when we look at the oracle itself for the individual?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's the way to go, yes.
Yeah, so once you cross over that and you hit that degree, that's the point you're looking at. The interesting part, I think, about that is that it really is it's a sort of a universal symbology kind of grid. And, when we're talking about this, because of the simple fact that it doesn't really matter where we are. We're talking more about the placement and the degree association of the planets rather than the location of them to individuals on the planet. So we can say the influence of the sun, say, for example, today at 3 degrees Leo is going to impact everyone who's on the planet and will have the influence of 3 degrees Leo all day, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Interesting, yeah. It's fascinating. Do you find that the oracle or so I'm curious, in your observation of this over these past 9 years that you've been doing this, what have you come away with? Have you found that I'm sure you have, because I've had this experience myself. There's days when you're just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely perfect for the day that's going on. But there are other days where you have to kind of stretch a little bit. Do you find yourself in that situation very often, or do you think that they're pretty representative of what's going on?
I don't know. It comes and goes. There's days when it's just there. I hardly, all I can do is keep up with my typing.
That's right, exactly, yeah.
It's just right there, and I don't even think about it. There's other days I look at it and I go, God, what does that symbol mean? But then I have my ways of setting it up and getting my juices going, so to speak, and it comes through me. Something occurs, and I ask for it. I gently ask for it from the universe, and it comes to me. And then I realize, oh yeah, right, that's easy. And then I go ahead and do it. And then, I also want to say that, some days I feel like, God, that was a kind of a weak offering. And those are the days when the next morning I wake up and my inbox is filled with messages saying, wow, that was terrific.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. That's the wonder of astrology. When it's rich, it is very rich. And when it's not rich, it's pretty close. So, I mean, that's quite a nod for astrology, but I'm an ardent believer and or ardent follower of astrology and a student of it, so I understand exactly what's going on with it. It's a fascinating kind of discovery, and I think the fact that it's so tied to mathematics, I personally enjoy, because it gives it that sort of scientific credence that we're looking for. It gives it that foundation in a scientific realm where people can be more I think of astrology as a science and an art. I think it combines the best of both. I think it's the good astrologer is one who can take the scientific material and interpret it in a way that's meaningful through, psychology and personality and character and events and choices and all the things that we make. I think that's the combination that appeals to me. But I think that having that foundation in that sort of mathematical structure is very key to it.
Yeah, the mathematical structure comes through more almost in musical terms.
Yes, exactly.
You consider the horoscope or the chart that you're working with as a mandala, and that's what it is.
It is, yeah.
It's time and space organized beautifully with archetypal energies, and now an extra dimension of word images that can be thrilling to employ and use and bring the horoscope to life.
Yeah.
And within that, the organization, the internal organization of the Sabian symbols is absolutely astounding.
Yeah, it really is.
How the meanings relate, and you can do this as an astrologer. You understand what aspects are. They are contacts between archetypal energies of a certain flavor, and you can interpret these things. And when you start thinking in terms of harmonics, you see that this is a piece of music. Every day is like a beautiful piece of music.
Right.
And then you just go to town on that.
And the harmonies are there, the themes are there, the events are there, the energy's there. It really is amazing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what's his name? I can't think of his name now. Not Mark Edmund Jones, but it was. I'm totally blanking on this. But anyway, there was a person, and I'll remember his name in a few minutes. A very well-known person who wrote the book of Absolute Knowledge, I believe it was. Manly Hall. That's what I'm thinking of. And he was a fabulous person who suggested that there was a point in time when the powers that be within the world had decided that they were going to create some sort of pattern for those 5 extra days that are in the year to accommodate them and sort of call them universal, not existent days or whatever. There was some sort of council, but I guess it never got through to accommodate the 365-day calendar that we have. But the fact that they're so closely aligned is pretty remarkable. But as you say, there are days when you're not quite into that degree and you can't predict for that day yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual. Do you think? So let's just ask you this question: when you do this for yourself, as you must do for yourself, you must be tracking certain characteristics within your own personal chart that allow you to use the oracle or the benefit of the degree in a way that's constructive for you. So in other words, you must find some degree on a day. I'm not sure I'm not sort of asking you what that degree is for you personally. Do you use the sun as your personal day, or do you sort of try to find a combination of themes based on the aspects?
I'm always thinking in terms of combinations of things, never just isolating one thing. You can lay emphasis on sun, moon, ascendant, midheaven, yes, and I do that as a matter of course, but I see things, they're like wonderful little complexes, like complex words and movements of music. I think in those terms.
Right, I do too. I know exactly what you mean, and I sort of see the resonance of the theme that's there and how it speaks to me as an individual, and sort of the key words, which are very important. When Mark Edmund Jones wrote his book, he'd always include a key word, and I think that each of the symbols has the ability to be reflective in one way or the other, and each of them can be perceived either in a positive light or in a negative light. I think that's fairly accurate to say with regard to how they are interpreted. And I think they're a wonderful adjunct, and I think, I use them all the time to supplement my astrology readings. When I do my clients, I'll always bring up their certain characteristics, and I always find them to be fascinating. And I'm curious, do you use the ascendant as a degree point yourself in your own personal readings?
Yes, of course.
Of course you do. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, I have a very straightforward way of preparing a horoscope, and I do the same thing. So, I just print off a hub chart,
right?
American Classic hub chart, and I keep it really simple and plain without a whole bunch of junk on the page. And then I start with the sun, the moon, and the ascendant and the midheaven, and I write the Sabian symbols for those planets and points, and then everything else. I just jot down a little shorthand for the Sabian symbol. That gets my mind going, and I'm thinking things are, I'm noticing, oh, there's a connection here, there's a connection there, and then I do the rest of my astrological analysis. And when I've got all those notes kind of prepared and ready, then I go back and I start thinking the Sabian symbols again, and then boom, I notice, yes, this is a big thing. This is a big thing.
Yeah.
And I have a good idea of where we're going in the conversation with the client.
Yeah. Now, but when you apply it to the mundane or to the greater population of the entire planet, you're obviously going to be picking up on a theme that's maybe we would assume, or we could conclude, would be prevalent that day for when this was happening. And do you see this sort of happening in the future as sort of an applying pressure, or as an eroding pressure?
Not sure what you're asking me, Chris.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're looking at, say, let's just take today, for example, 3 degrees Leo is the sun, and Mars is right there next to it. Would you consider the events of the day to be the represented by the oracle of that degree for today, or would you see that manifested, say, tomorrow or the day before? It's that variance of before and after.
Oh, okay. All right. I love this question. All right. Here's my answer. You're going to hate this answer, but it's a great answer. It is very much that the sun is in the 4th degree of Leo. So is Mars in the 4th degree of Leo today. So, you have to combine those two energies together. That brings vigor. That brings a pointedness and assertiveness. A kind of a step forward energy that comes through that. And then you interpret that through the 4th degree of Leo, the Sabian symbol for it. And it's this bizarre symbol, about a formally dressed man, and there's a deer with folded horns. Oh my God, this is such a curious thing. And so the whole expression of that is definitely for today. But as a matter of fact, and here's the weird part of my answer is, even though I can be precise about when the sun has entered that particular Sabian symbol, that degree of the zodiac, I have found that it gets really sloppy in the sense that time seems to have a groove. And sometimes that groove is a little slower and you can pick it up the day before. And sometimes, it's slopping over into the next day while the sun has already entered into the next degree. I think this has something to do with how you get 360 degrees into 365 days of the year. There's got to be something that's wobbling a bit. So on the one hand, there's precision because you can, by your atomic clock, you can go exactly when things are chronologically precise. Mm-hmm. And that's reassuring in one level. But on another level, when you watch the Sabian symbols, the meanings and the significance for people seems to just kind of be a little sloppier, a little looser.
And I actually like that answer. I don't hate that answer because I kind of view time much the same way. I think that what strikes me, I write a weekly astrology report for the signs. So within that week, I'm not gonna have the precision of saying Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I'm gonna say within that week you're gonna see this particular theme is going to occur or something like that. I like that idea better because it speaks more to the sort of the interpretive quality of time itself and the overlap of a theme. These are sort of large influential themes that we see descending upon us, and we may feel a certain kind of electricity on a certain day, or we may feel a certain sluggishness on some days. I think that's very accurate, and it sort of accounts for the ebb and flow of life and time and tides and moon and any number of other things that are part of our influences. So I think that actually makes quite a bit of sense.
Okay, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, no, I'm not one that's bound by the precision. I'm much more of a thematic kind of an astrologer because I don't like. I guess I do that because I'm sort of my practice, but also a little bit out of stubbornness because I don't like people who come up to me and say, when's a good day to buy a lottery ticket? Or when should I get pregnant? I like the idea of having the overarching theme be there. And I say, well, if you've got Jupiter in your second house, obviously that's not a bad day. But you know what I'm saying? Or the moon coming through your transiting Jupiter in your second house. Maybe or Venus, perhaps. I like those ideas, but I like the idea of it being thematic because we don't really have the ability to nail down what's going to happen any one day per se, but we can get in the ballpark, so to speak.
Yeah, I'll write daily, and then it looks like, gosh, I expect that to show up in the headlines of the news, and it doesn't.
Right. But you see, the thing is that I think this forces us to, and I encourage my clients and people who I talk to about astrology all the time, to expand that story in some capacity, which I think the Sabian symbols lend themselves to quite efficiently, because there's enough verbiage there, enough content about the symbols to tease that story open. I think that any astrologer who looks at a chart, to me, the astrology chart is a series of stories that are in there. There's complex stories in there, and it's all about you. We may identify the story as an astrologer, but the client may be able to interpret it differently because, well, it may not be that this, but it is more like that. We're in the realm of, we're in the sector. We're kind of like in the house, so to speak. We're in the room where this event may be happening, and that's an important distinction, I think, for people to make, especially when you give advice as an astrologer, as I do, about when to hold and when to fold, so to speak, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. And I think the oracle and the key words in particular are manifest. And I would also say that some people, you know, when I pull a keyword for them, may say, oh my gosh, that's a terrible word or whatever. I say, well, not necessarily. And you may be rebellious, but you know, rebellion can be throwing stones at the state capitol, or and lighting the White House on fire, or rebellion can be trying something new and innovative. So there's always that juxtaposition of themes that can shift at any point in time. I think it's important for us to interpret them that way. I think that's the beauty. I think that's how Edmonds perhaps set it up, was that so there's always this duality there. There's sort of this reflective quality of good and the bad that are there, or the potential or the potential is always there, I guess is what I'm saying, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, my approach to the whole symbolic theme here is that a symbol is to be simply defined as something that ever means more. There's ever more sense in a symbol.
Yes.
So you don't nail them down. You don't say this means this means that. And even with regards to the key words that Mark Edmund Jones used for his 1953 book, The Sabian Symbols in Astrology, he said, you know what, this is probably the fifth round version of key words. We've chucked all the earlier ones, and here I am, and these are the ones I'm putting forward now. And I took that comment to mean, like, don't limit yourself. Now, just because he's put down a key word, you can change the key word. So when I wrote my book in 2004 on the Sabian Symbols, I noticed that I was very often going with different key words. Not all the time, but very often. And then as I started to write my daily newsletter, I realized, wow, I'm actually kind of making this up as I go along, because now I'm thinking about the sun, yes, but I'm thinking about where the moon is and where all the other planets are, and what is the flavor of the day? What keyword could I put with that? So that's what I attempt to do anyway. My point being is that it's an ongoing process, and if anybody says, I know what this means, then you should run.
I tend to agree with you too. I think the interpretive power of it is phenomenal, because we're not going to have 4 degrees Leo in 2017 may be much different than 4 degrees Leo in 2016. And I think that's part of what our interpretive powers allow us to do when we take into account what else is happening in the planet at the same time, especially with regard to aspects and such. We're speaking today with Blain Bovee. His website is BlainBovee.com, Blain Bovee, and we're talking about the Sabian symbols. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes, so hang in there, and we will pick up where we left off, and we'll be right back. Thanks so much.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back. My mistake. It is Bovee Astrology. It's Bovee astrology.com. Bovee astrology.com. Not the other one I mentioned earlier. I apologize for that. That's great to be corrected. I love to be corrected. Anyway, we're talking today about the Sabian symbols. And to me, when I first discovered the Sabian symbols, I was awestruck. I said, wow, what a fantastic thing this is. How do you think this came about? And do you place a lot of faith in the psychic powers of Elsie Wheeler and the way this whole thing came about? Did this seem to you too far-fetched at first, or was this really something that just grabbed you?
The way I came to the Sabian symbols was the way I came to astrology. I really just knew nothing about it at all. I went to a summer solstice gathering at Niagara Falls, and I like to say I went to Niagara Falls and fell in. And the people that I met there are very, very good, very well-known astrologers, and became very good friends, and they all use the Sabian symbols. So I just took it as something that was natural.
Yeah, just part of your tool bag, yeah.
Yeah, and it turned out I have a way with them. I didn't really realize that until people started pointing it out to me that, wow, you should do something with this. Let's see, what was that? I'm missing part of your question.
No, I'm just wondering how, because it's to the average person, to the average outside person who's skeptical, they may look at this and say, this is a little far-fetched. You got a guy and a lady sitting in a park in San Diego on a hot day in 1929 or whatever it was, and they're coming up with this. Why should we believe it? And I guess that's sort of the question. But when we look at them and we tease the story out of the symbols and the key words, we can begin to see the relevance there.
Right. So do I trust in it? Yes, I do, because I somehow I feel an affinity with Mark Evan Jones and Elsie Wheeler and the disembodied fellowship of ancient wisdom. It's just there. It's something that I can touch into and connect with, all three parts of the creative force that brought that about. Now, the thing is that there's a lot of other symbol degree systems that have been created, and there's probably oodles of them at this particular point, because people email me with their work and their creation of their symbols and you go, well, that's wonderful. I love that creative exercise, but why? What makes the Sabian symbols stand out above them? Okay, I don't know why they do. I think there is a quality of the wisdom that's tapped into. I think there was something extraordinary to be honored about 1925, and when that was created. And I think that over time, much to the surprise of a lot of people, they have really endured. They have endured, and it is worth going back to honor them, especially in their original form, because quite frankly, it's become, for some reason, sport to change how the Sabian symbols read. And I have an issue with that. And
yeah, I do too.
I do too. It's just simply this, that use the original and then interpret like crazy.
Right.
But if you're going to interpret and change the words, that's already an interpretation if you change any of the words. And when you do that, please have the decency, the professional decency to acknowledge that, no, as a matter of fact, Mark Edmund Jones' words were these. And we know what the words are because I'll mention Diana Roche, who I absolutely love. That book that she wrote, because she was the administrator of the Mark Edmund Jones archive for a number of years, she included the photographs of the actual cards. That's it. That's the end of the debate. You know what the original symbol is.
Right, yeah. And you can't deny that. Yeah, you can't
deny that. So my work, my experience is simply this. The original Sabian symbols work. Do I have nicknames? Do I call them my pet names? Yes, I do. That's part of the job. You're supposed to interpret, but please, out of respect for Mark Edmund Jones, acknowledge the original.
Yeah, I think I totally subscribe to that too. I think that's a good way to sort of draw the line on that quality. What I always found interesting about Mark Edmund Jones when I was researching him when I was younger was the fact that he was a Presbyterian minister. Now, what's interesting about that was my father was a minister, but not a Presbyterian one, but my father was dead set against astrology when I was growing up, so I obviously was a typical minister's son in that regard, being rebellious in that capacity. But what I found to be interesting about it is that Presbyterians, as a general rule, believe in a sense of predestiny. And so this sort of ties in directly with sort of the idea of astrology. Because if we are born with a map of symbols and symbology and potential and energy that's imbued in us as an astrological entity, it makes perfect sense that there would be a set of sort of predestination in there. There'd be a sense of sort of fait accompli, or at least the idea of this is your owner's manual, these are your operating instructions, and this is how you move forward. That makes perfect sense to me.
Well, yeah, and I think there's even more to say about it. I think the whole idea of an oracle, which basically the word oracle means that there is some sort of connection, communicative connection between this world and a world that has more juice, numinous presence. For example, I've just been reading Black Elk again, and I just love it. There's this beautiful line that just says, well, there's the world that we live in, and it's the apparent world, but the world of spirit is where the spirit of all the beings, all the creatures lives. That's the true world. And an oracle is what the message is that comes and goes back and forth, the communication back and forth between the two. So this opens up a whole, it's not necessarily predestination, although I can see why you would go that way or think in those terms. But it is a responsive feedback system that you're in.
Right.
You're aware that who you are is something more than who you think you are. And you're aware that there's something more going on here. And we would bandy about words like true world or apparent world or,
real news, fake news.
Yeah, really. But our task as existing is that we are constantly in a feedback system here. We're communicating with ourselves, our higher selves, with ancestors, yes, with the past, with the parallel existences, with our desires, and you can work with this stuff. The Sabian symbols just gives you more fuel and ammunition for this.
I love that. I think it helps us understand it. It helps us interpret it. I really do think of it as a guide. I think it's a master plan of some sorts that is pointing us in a direction and teaching us lessons about how to respond accordingly within that realm. I think that's what it really does. It helps us respond in a way. It gives us guidance for how to respond, perhaps, or how to act. And I think it's the wealth of information that's there is just incredibly rich and so phenomenal. It almost makes me wonder why it took until 1929, I think is what the year was, if I'm not mistaken, when it first came about, and why it wasn't there earlier, or perhaps it was.
Oh, it was there earlier. The symbols were created in 1925.
25, that's the year ago. Yeah.
Okay, and the whole idea that there is a way to connect in with a deeper, more esoteric meaning of each degree of the zodiac was obviously something that had already been played with a great deal, but unsuccessfully, because people bring their baggage to
Right.
to that kind of work. I think something happened here that is very pure, and despite Mark Emmett Jones being unhappy with some of the symbols, he called them reverse symbols, something that was really beautiful, including the idea that you can take a look at how a symbol directs your mind to think about a concept or an issue, and see it in a different light, just opening your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not everybody is going to be happy because they've got a planet that's placed in a Jewish rabbi or in the Pope degree. You know, they say, wait a minute, I'm not Catholic. What's this got to do with me? Well, it's not about being Catholic at all. It's just that a Pope is a bridge. He's a bridge between the divine and the ordinary everyday existence. And so the whole idea of that bridge is one of blessing. It's a blessing degree. We're talking about Sagittarius 30 in that case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is just a blessing degree. Now, people say, well, what is blessing? You know, okay, they kind of run over that. And I just say, no, hang on. Without blessing, without the blessing function, we are all very, very unhappy. We really just need to look into each other's eyes and hearts and say, I see you and I am well pleased.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Namaste.
Right,
you know?
right.
Powerful concept brought to a person, and they start going, oh, well, you know, I've been muttering under my breath and kind of cursing people. Well, so did, you know, some of the generals in Hitler's Germany, because it's amazing. You know, Stalin has a placement there, and one of the nasty German generals has a placement there, and it's just that rather than blessing, you get the opposite. You get cursing. You get people who are actually doing the opposite of the blessing function.
Which I think I would argue is sort of part of what it takes to keep balance, I guess. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure. I'm not going to comment on that, but I think it's there. I think without the polarization of things, we don't really have equanimity. I think we need to have some of that. And I'm not suggesting that people run around and be nasty to each other. I'd much rather have love be the reigning guidance power. But I do think that there's a place for that in sort of the logic of the yin and the yang kind of idea.
Yeah, okay, but it's even more, I think, more important because you get to reflect upon, well, who am I and what am I about? Mm-hmm. I've got a choice here. My choice is I can smile on my brother or I can curse. Mm-hmm. And then, you see how valuable that is for the individual in a astrological session. They go, oh my God, I've been putting a lot of energy in here to grumbling and complaining about my husband or my wife. Well, why? Is that what you prefer? You have something that's important about you that is the blessing function in this case. Why not bless?
Right.
It's easy. You can give it away like anything. It's free.
Right. It is. It's very true. When you look at significant worldwide or significant cosmological events or astronomical events, do you spend time looking at those degrees? Like, let's take, for example, the eclipse coming up this summer on August 21st at 28, 29 degrees Leo. What do you think is symbolic in that particular symbol?
Oh, so it's 29 Leo?
Right.
Okay. Well, basically we got an idea here of 29 Leo belongs to a series of symbols that has to do with tight spaces. It's like the symbol is a mermaid in this case, but the family of symbols, everybody's in a tight space and trying to wiggle free. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea about this, I think that can be applied, and everybody can use this, whether the eclipse is the triggering factor here or not. is that you can learn how to get something moving, and it's through very small motion. It's wiggling. It really is. And it's a yoga. I call them little yogas. So, something's going on here and you feel like, we're in a tight spot. I don't see any way how we can move. Well, you just start wiggling and you will wiggle free. You'll create space with that motion. But applying that on, a worldwide stage, I would suggest that you would see large numbers of people get into a state where they feel like they can't move, like, oh my gosh, this is impossible to move. And so the sense of the eclipse happening in that particular degree is that, oh no, learn how to wiggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, take small steps. I mean, I think that's actually in some ways, the groundwork for that is already in place. We're seeing people, they're saying, well, we have, there's the resist movement or whatever you want to call it. It's more about the idea of it's better to be doing something than nothing. And I think your comment about wiggling is the right adjective for that. It's about making some motion that gets things moving in a different direction. And nothing happens easily, and nothing happens overnight. But the fact of the collective power of people wiggling, for lack of a better definition, could be huge. I mean, it could be enough to move things dramatically. And I think that in that ability is progress. That is sort of progress. We're not stagnant. We're not static. We are dynamic individuals. We have a dynamic place on the earth, and we can move that forward in very small steps, yes, but that is what it takes. Progress is progress, regardless of how you look at it. We are going, and we're always going to be going in a certain direction, because every day we wake up is a new day. Every day presents itself with new potential.
Yeah, let me expand a little bit on the wiggle thing here, okay? The reason I want to go with the word wiggle and that little action is that it brings it down to earth. It's something you can actually do. Everybody gets the concept that if you feel like you're in a straitjacket, well, how do you get out of that? Well, you start wiggling, and you create some space. So listen to the other symbols in the same set. We have a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, which doesn't happen with a big jerk or anything. The butterfly has to struggle to break free from the chrysalis. Then you get two cobblers working at a table. And cobblers, of course, one of the meanings of cobblers is laying cobblestone on the street. And those are stones that are tightly fit so that they don't wiggle. But if you're going to work in close quarters with somebody, you have to find wiggle room. Right, so you take a little tool and you start moving. You scrape out the sand, you scrape out the rocks and the gravel, and you start shaking the stone, and eventually it comes free. It's something that you can tacitly appreciate and understand, and recognize that perhaps if you have a placement or a point in this particular degree, you realize that you very often feel as if you're in a situation where it's so tight that you have no escape. There's no room to move. So that's the way I like to deliver the Sabian symbols to my clients. I don't speak jargon. I give them something that they can actually work with. In fact, we work with them during the session so that they get it.
Right. And that's what I love about them, because they do have that, the keywords in particular and the surrounding text that goes with them really sort of allow a lot of room, again, a lot of wiggle room, not coincidentally, to figure out how to interpret those signs and those symbols. When you see something like a full moon or an eclipse or a new moon, do you put extra weight on those degrees when they are exactly at that point? Or
yes.
You do. You see them as being more powerful because they are in, or even anytime planets are in direct conjunction with each other, you would have that, or in opposition, I suppose, too, right?
Yes, opposition squares. Today, come back today. We have a Sun conjunct Mars in the 4th degree of Leo.
Right.
And if you take a look at that, it's actually those two, the Sun and Mars, are quindicile Pluto. And quindicile is just kind of an obsessive-driven aspect. And so if this was happening in somebody's chart and resonated with somebody's chart today, there could be a little bit of overkill in terms of anger, or trying to do too much, like I'm going to go out and pick up that bus,
Right.
Move it across the street. No. Maybe that's just a little bit too much. It's like going too far with this thing.
Overly ambitious, or thinking too large, or pushing yourself too hard, or driving too hard. Mars is that great aggressive entity that we see a lot happening there, and it has the ability to sort of motivate people in ways which might be unrealistic, as you say. It's a fascinating way of living, and I think that the idea of it ultimately is what I like about it, I think probably more than anything else, is that it allows us to be a little bit kinder, as you mentioned earlier, to each other, because it allows us to say, okay, well, and I think this is about astrology in general. It really imbues us with a sense of, I hope, tolerance for others, because we can say, listen, you may not have wanted to be born on this day, but you were born on this day, and this is who you are. And I've even had clients come to me and say, I don't like my I don't like my astrology chart. And I'm saying, well, I'm sorry. There's not a lot you can do about it. It's kind of like being born with a fingerprint or a freckle. You've got it, whether you like it or not. And the best thing to do is, rather than reject that, is to sort of embrace it and try to find the silver lining. If you see your horoscope as a cloud, try to find the silver lining in that cloud, because it is there. We are all a composite of assets and liabilities. This is the great mystery of astrology and the great mystery of life. We are a composite of we are dualistic individuals.
Yeah, I personally, I don't have any problems with any difficult chart, so-called difficult chart that's put before me, or anything that a client thinks, oh, I wish I didn't have this. I can show them why they're glad they have it. And the Sabian symbols actually help me do that, because I can take something that, yeah, sure, we can project and imagine how this could be, not really desirable. But on the other hand, there's something else that's going on here that is a positive thing. Is this kind of like how one uses words, how one uses communication in a session is extremely important. So Saturn isn't always a roadblock. It isn't always, guilt. It isn't always restrictions and laws and intractable things that we come up against. You could think of Saturn as being responsiveness.
Yeah, I actually don't think of Saturn as being a negative or malefic planet at all. I actually think of it as, I always use the example of, it's like your mother telling you to pick up your room on Saturday morning before you go out to play. You need to have that structure, and Saturn is what keeps us on the straight and narrow. It's a great protector. It reminds us of what we must do in order to be who we really are. We can't, and I don't think that by converse that Jupiter is necessarily a wonderfully benefic planet all the time, because sometimes it can amplify wherever it is in your chart. So I think it's important to sort of bring that sort of levity and balance to the interpretation of the chart at any time, at any point in time when we talk with people.
It's refreshing. People are more than who they think they are. That's sort of a working principle.
Right. And I always think of the squares, the oppositions, any sort of what we consider to be difficult or challenging aspects in an astrology chart are actually our greatest gifts, because they are what motivate us to get things done and get them done properly. I think this is a great opportunity. The potential is there. Potential exists in all forms of us, in our energy fields in some capacity. How we manifest that potential is up to us. But that key, that energy, that tool is there for us to wield and use. It's simply up to us to decide how we want to turn that. And that's one of the great choices of life. And that may be based on where you are in your life at the time that you're making decisions, based on the transits. So they all have
There you go. You say yes to squares and oppositions.
I always say yes to squares and oppositions. But
You're right.
I have a lot of them in my chart, so I figure it's better to accept them than it is to deny them. They're just going to get me sooner or later, so I just accept them and go with them. So it's funny. But the Sabian symbols, I think, and when you talk about, you mentioned it earlier on that you thought this was the future of astrology, which is kind of ironic in a way, because they are older. But it does give it gives a lot more precision to the charts than we might have seen in traditional Western astrology, perhaps. I mean, it gives you a lot more detail. There's a lot more meat on the bones there.
Oh, I might exaggerate in saying that Sabian symbols are the future of astrology, but here's what I mean by it. I'm well aware that there are a lot of astrologers out there who are extremely good at measuring. They can analytically measure the pants off of you, and this is good. This is a real skill. It furthers the profession of astrology. But they also tend to be people who don't like symbols, and they don't they don't like things that are ambivalent, and that they tend not to connect with that. There are, on the other hand, there are an awful lot of people who like to engage in astrology in a more of an intuitive way, using higher mind, higher intelligence, calling that in, and a little bit more playful, a little bit more poetic. So I've definitely fallen into the latter camp, and I think a lot of people do as well. And what I think is going on, especially at this particular time in history with Neptune being in Pisces, I think that there's a tremendous surge going on of a spiritual awareness, of tuning in, attunement with oneself in accordance with your higher self, with other dimensions of existence, of reality. I think this is going on quietly, but like wildfire.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think we're seeing a dramatic shift in what we used to call traditional religions, more to people turning towards this sort of a modality, because it is more contemporary. I think it speaks to us greater. It has more, in some ways, it has more validity, and I think that we are in that point. And it's interesting because we look back at the last time Neptune was in Pisces, we saw a very similar kind of resurgence of this same sort of thinking back then too. I think it's great because people, we need it now more than ever. We need to have something to hang on to that fills that void. I think that sort of fills that character, because we're not quite as enamored with the traditional, conventional religions that we've been perhaps raised with in Western society. So people are looking other places, and they're finding answers that can be quite comforting and very compelling.
I think anything that empowers you to make your own choice, to recognize that when you have that little flash, a thrill up your spine, that little tinge of recognition of, right, I'm on the right track here. That's exciting. And astrology is a perfect tool to gift yourself with that, or have somebody show you just how amazing you are, help you introduce yourself to yourself in a revelatory way.
Yeah.
Sabian Symbols just takes that, and it's kind of like leading you out onto center stage and saying, okay, here we are in a scene. Show me how you act here. And they go, oh my goodness, how did you know this? And they start acting, they get into the experience, they get into the memory. They go, oh my goodness, this was so important to me, and I've done that. All kinds of rich, beautiful things come out of a conversation when they are keyed by the Sabian Symbols.
Right, and when people, I think, are more attuned to what synchronicity brings to their lives, I think that synchronicity is somewhat, I'm very well aware of it. I certainly am keenly aware of it, and I look for it all the time. But I think that those are symbols, those are signposts that we're doing the right thing. I think anytime a synchronistic event happens of meaning, not just that, you bumped into your next door neighbor, but something that's far more powerful and meaningful to your personal life, I think that those are clear markers that you're on the right path.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it gets down to the point where you go, what is the life worth living? You really do look for sense and connection, both with yourself and your loved ones, your friends, your community. You look for that sense that is exciting.
Yeah.
That is thrilling. That feels fire.
We want meaning. We want purpose in our life. We want to feel as if we are here to accomplish something, and the astrology chart and these Sabian symbols allow us to discover that. It may not be what you would have picked if you were at the store and choosing your own personality before you were born, but that doesn't matter. It's what you've got. You're here to work with it.
Right.
All right. Oh, that's been great. We are running, and we knew we'd run out of time very quickly, but I am happy you're able to come on today. My guest today has been Blain Bovee. His website is Bovee Astrology. That's BOVEE astrology.com. I encourage you to sign up for his newsletter. I get it every day. It's great. I love seeing what the symbols are for the day. I was always struck by that. It's just a really, really entertaining and very enriching experience to know what's happening and how we can best manifest it, because it can really serve your greater purpose to a much better ending. I think, at least. Anyway, so thanks so much, Blain, for coming on today. Again, Blain Bovee. We've been talking today about the Sabian Symbols. I call them an oracle of degree, which is exactly what they are. They are an oracle. We can refer to them. It's a fascinating discovery. Mark Edmund Jones is the man who came up with it. You can look up the word Sabian. It's Sabian symbols. You'll find it, and you will be greatly enriched by your discovery and understanding of these symbols. And so I encourage you to do that. Blain Bovee, Bovee, astrology.com. Thanks so much, Blain, for coming on today. It's been great having a conversation with you.
Thanks, Chris. It was a real pleasure. Hope we get to do it again.
Sure, absolutely, we will. We'll just make a date. We'll call it that, make a date. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.